Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I'm smiling because I appreciate you all saying hello in the chat box and letting us know that you're there and where you're from. I'm Dreama Gentry, Executive Director here at Partners for Education at Berea College. So I'm here in Kentucky today, and I'm actually in my office because I can't trust my broadband at home. So thank you all for this conversation. If you have questions for the presenters during this session, or thoughts that you want us to make sure we capture, please do continue to use the chat function. We're new at this. This is our first conversation on Zoom like this. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer the questions during this hour, but we're committed to answering them and sending a Q&A out when we send the link to this Zoom conversation. So when we had to cancel our National Rural College Access and Success Summit back in April because of COVID-19, we made the commitment to continuing the dialogue and the conversations because I think this continuing connecting is even more important now. So this is our first Zoom conversation. We'll be doing one of these each month. We're also taking this Zoom conversation and some of the audio from this and bringing in some additional perspectives to do a podcast on the same theme, and that you'll receive a link to this webinar, the Q&A questions and answers, and then also the podcast, probably this time within a week and a half, 2 weeks after this event. And then we'll share it online. So we appreciate that continued conversation. So I'm excited that this first conversation, I've got two folks, one I've known forever and really appreciate working alongside Luke Hodson. And then Andrew Moe and I over the last year or so have started really working closer together. So I'm really excited that Luke and Andrew are joining us today because as a college access and success professional, you know, I'm concerned about the rural students I'm working with, those that are attending college in the fall, those that are going back to college, but also those that are juniors and sophomores that are starting to plan. So today's conversation will be perspectives from two strong leaders that really understand rural colleges and rural students. So I'm just going to turn it over to Luke first and then Andrew to introduce yourselves. And as you do that, why rural? Why are you interested in talking today, and what's your connection to the success of rural students? So Luke, you want to lead us off?
Sure can. Thanks, Dreama. So greetings, everybody. I'm sitting in a very quiet admissions office on Berea's campus, which is unusual for us, but nonetheless happy to join today's conversation. As Dreama mentioned, she and I have worked together for many years now, and I've spent the last 15 years in the admissions office here at Berea, currently serving as the Associate Vice President of Admissions. And had someone told me that would be my job when I grew up, so to speak, I probably would have laughed. Nobody really goes to college to become the AVP of their alma mater, but I'm very proud to hold the position that I do and wouldn't really trade this work for anything else, I believe. In terms of why rural for me, it kind of comes back to probably three kind of things that I can think of. One is I was born and raised in Eastern Kentucky. So very much the coal fields of Kentucky. My parents have always been involved in service work their entire lives. So that kind of giving back mentality was instilled in me very early. And so it also meant that growing up in Eastern Kentucky in particular, I saw firsthand kind of the gaps in education, effects of the drug epidemic, as well as a host of other things that we could mention that impact rural communities. And so as I finished my degree at Berea, it really resulted in this kind of that experience leading me to my first job, which was the Upper Bound program that at the time was sponsored by Union College, and they no longer have that grant. But at the time, our grant was serving some of the poorest counties in Kentucky. And even growing up there, I thought I knew that part of the state, but I was able to see at a much deeper level what students were really facing in terms of access to college. And so that really motivated me to think deeper about this as a career and a passion, and really focusing on how can I help students, pursue their college aspirations. And so as a little kid, I was like, okay, I see all these things, but what can I really do? I can't impact that. And then as my first job, I was like, well, okay, I can see how I can start to play into this picture and kind of help make an impact. And then certainly when the opportunity came back to work for Berea College, that was really when it hit home for me, because it kind of was like coming back home. And so I've spent the last 15 years now working at an institution that is primarily focused on serving students from the Appalachian region. And many of those are coming from very rural kind of areas. And so I can't think of any better place really that's committed to this population than Berea College. And so I'm often asked, what's my favorite day on campus? Is it move-in day, when first year students kind of move into their experience, or is it graduation day? And that's a really hard question to ask an admissions officer because there's so much work goes into getting them to campus. But if I'm being honest, it's all about commencement and graduation day, because the work we do up front in admissions is supposed to ultimately get them to that point. And I'm always amazed at Berea when we ask our first generation students to stand up at commencement, and it's well over half of the students are standing up. To me, that is why rural is important, because you instantly see the impact and the opportunity to change generations for the better through education. And that's a little bit about me and why rural.
Thanks, Luke. Andrew?
Hey, my name is Andrew Moe, and I'm Director of Admissions at Swarthmore College, which is located in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, in suburban Philadelphia. I've been here for about 5 years now. Previously, I served in the admissions office at Vanderbilt University as well. So in the profession for about a decade, and all that time thinking about rural college access. And now that I'm Director of Admissions, really finally able to do a lot of really good things, I think. I grew up in a trailer park on the outskirts of a small city called Janesville, Wisconsin. So I don't personally claim to be rural, but I do see some similarities. We often think about concentrated poverty in bigger cities, and that certainly can be the case in smaller towns as well. I'm first generation of my family to go to college and low income, going through this process. And in my town, we saw a lot of similarities to being rural. And so sort of geographic isolation, not connected to a major city, lots of farmers, cow pastures. A lot of folks that I went to school with were certainly living in more of the rural areas. And specifically to my profession now, no colleges visiting my high school, no college fairs that were being held in my town. And so from there, I made it to Arizona State University. So coming from a relatively small town to a university that was bigger than my hometown was quite a shock. But you know, I graduated on time in 4 years and went on to graduate school at Vandy and the University of Pennsylvania. Really why I do this today is I get to work with students and counselors across the entire world, but one of my favorite constituent groups is rural and small town folks, because rural perspectives and rural students are valuable. Their perspectives create really deep dimensions within our classrooms that a lot of our students are not able to understand within their home context. And so when they get to meet students that are very unlike them, I think it really elevates the conversation. And I really recognize that counselors and advisors in rural spaces often are not folded into our larger professional networks. They might not have professional development. They might sort of be on their own. They might be the only counselor in a 45-minute vicinity, and so they feel more isolated. And what I and a few other colleagues did a few years ago was create a network for those folks. And it's called it's a long title, National Association for College Admission Counseling Rural and Small Town Special Interest Group, or the Rural SIG is what we call it. And it's a collection of 1,600 folks from across the country in all 50 states in rural and small town communities that are really trying to support and boost rural college access and lift all of these communities up, whether you're a student, you're a faculty member studying these issues, or you're an admissions officer trying to do really good work. So that's sort of my why rural in a nutshell.
Thank you all. And I think, you know, it's interesting to me as we do this work in rural America, how many of the leaders and those doing the work actually are those low-income first-gen students themselves. I think that that's one of the reasons I've enjoyed being such a part of this community. When we do our work in planning for the Rural Summit, but also our work here in Berea, we always start with data and try to use data to inform a conversation. So as we were thinking about the conversation we're having today, we realized that it actually is the voices of young people and students that we need to be hearing and have those voices inform us. So we reached out to 2 students, and honestly, we did students that we knew this time because we needed to do this quickly. So Shelby Acton, you'll meet Shelby in just a second on the video clip. She just graduated from Pulaski County High School in Kentucky, and was in the Berea College Talent Search Program. And she's going to Eastern Kentucky University in the fall. We also reached out to Malcolm Davis. Malcolm was a Gear Up student from here in Berea. And actually, full disclosure, he's my kid. You know, I had a college student living with me. I thought it would make sense to use that. Malcolm just finished his junior year at Grinnell College in Iowa, and he'll be attending back for his senior year. So I'm going to share my screen and share the words of Malcolm and Shelby to inform our next conversation. So bear with me as I share.
Actually, my college search was pretty hard. I had to tour like 11 colleges to finally decide. So when I finally I decided on Eastern because it's like an hour from my house. And so it was like perfect distance, and they have an amazing elementary education program, which I hope to teach like younger grades, like kindergarten and stuff, because that's like, I just love them. But after COVID, where I am like a Pell Grant recipient, I could have went to my community college for 2 years and I could have got money back. So whenever they're talking about like doing online college, it kind of like smacks me in the face, and it's like, oh, I could have done this I could have done this anyway, and I could have got money back, which looking at it, I would have got like maybe $10,000 back for these 2 years. But at Eastern, where I'm entering as a freshman, I get $10,000 for like all 4 years as a freshman scholarship because of my grades and stuff. So I chose to go to Eastern for that reason. I was like, I'll get to be on campus, I'll get to live there. But like, if I'm not going to be on campus, like there was times where I'm like, what is the point of me even going? Like, I probably should have went to Somerset. And it's just been hard. But Eastern's been very good about communicating with us. They're like, we're going to try our best to make you guys have like the best experience you can. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get to be on campus. It might not always be the best sometimes. Like we might have to have days where like we don't have class and that stuff. But at the same time, where I'm a freshman, I haven't lived the college experience. So it won't be like nothing weird to me. It's going to be weird in general. So like, I feel like if any time's the time to do weird schedules and stuff, it's your freshman year, because then I'm not used to the regular stuff. But there was times where I literally sat there and I was like, what's the point of me paying $7,000 a year to go to one college when I could have got money back going to another? Or if I'm going to be at home, why did I even do this? I could be working. It was just hard times. But as it's went on and life's like got a little light at the end of the tunnel, I'm like, yeah, I think going to Eastern would probably be the best choice regardless, because even if I don't get to go this year, there's always the spring semester or even next year. I mean, I got 4 years.
It was pretty surreal, honestly, to be finishing up, the third year of college away from my peers, and sort of not being able to see the class above me graduate, not be able to sort of continue to have that community. I was lucky because, I'm privileged to have a home life that allows me to continue my education in a stable and secure way. Whereas some people, it was much more difficult for them to go home and continue their studies and balance their home life responsibilities and all that. But it was interesting. I think I have a lot of sympathy for the class above me because they didn't really get to finish their college experience that they had been planning to have.
I have for the college is mostly like, what are they going to do like new? Because obviously like what was going on before in the world wasn't working, because if it was working, we wouldn't have went through this. So like, are they going to offer us like sick days, like just in case we do get sick? Because right now you can get tested like all the time. But like whenever this first started, they were more like, if you have symptoms, stay home. We don't have enough tests. So like if we have symptoms, are they going to let us like miss class for it, or are they going to expect us to be there? Are they going to have like places on campus we can go get tested if we feel like it? Obviously, we won't need like 5 places to get tested because it's just one small campus. Or even like my campus is in a bigger city, so it's not really like there isn't a clinic down the road, but like, are they going to give us opportunities to like help ourselves if we need to? And are they going to require us to wear masks? I mean, I try to wear a mask in public. It's kind of hard sometimes, not going to lie. But I feel for retail workers wearing them all day. I understand their safety precaution, but it's just hard. Especially like trying to focus in class, like that's going to be different. One of my biggest like questions that I've had this whole time is, if we do go on campus, like science experiments. I have a science class my first semester. So like, am I going to be able to do that, or am I going to do it online? It's just like a bunch of stuff up in the air. It's just, I want to know what they're going to do to help us in this. Obviously, they will help us because that's their job. But it's like, are they going to offer us more opportunities to like try to be healthy, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
The main thing that goes through my head when I think about, returning to campus is probably about the safety and sort of stability they can provide as a campus. I mean, with Grinnell, they're looking at having students on campus, looking at testing students on campus. But my worry still comes down to, does the medical infrastructure of the community, we're going back to a rural town in my case, we're in Grinnell, Iowa, can it support bringing students back on campus, and do the risks outweigh the benefits, or vice versa? I think that's probably the most important thing, and also how well we can continue to operate as peers, as classmates, and as a sort of social community on campus. Will it be impossible to have gatherings? Will it be impossible for us to have student organizations, big parts of campus life? That without it, it wouldn't be exactly the same, and it wouldn't be for sure as fulfilling.
Chance to talk to them, I would honestly tell them that if they have the opportunity, that we need to be there. Even if I'm doing classes online, just me being there on campus would be like much more of an experience, because at home, I wouldn't have like a roommate to help me with work, or like, obviously I love my family. I love them very much, but at the end of the day, they don't really understand school very well, especially online. So I feel like even if I'm on campus, like in my dorm doing online classes, that it'll be easier to like function, because I could be like, hey, do you know the answer to this? Can you help me figure this out? All this stuff. But I feel like it'd be more of a focus, because when you're at home, many of my college friends from last year said that like their families didn't understand that even though they're home, they're not home, like they're still working. So I feel like if they can, I want to be there. Like, even if I have to do half of my classes online, I will happily do that. But I just want to be there on campus. Even if I don't get to live the full experience, then it's okay. There's nothing they can do about it, but I just want to be able to live a little bit of it. And I appreciate whatever they can do.
Suggest trying to maintain a lens of compassion when you're dealing with these students. I mean, this is a generation of freshmen coming in, incoming first years, that are living in a very unique time, and then going through in all honesty, most likely some very traumatic things as well, looking at the fallout of COVID-19. So I think that, maintaining that lens of passion and making sure that you're really there supporting them, because stepping away from their families, stepping away from their communities and moving to a new one is something that's very hard. It's already very hard going to college, leaving your community. But then to do it in the middle of a crisis, it doubles, I think. So that compassion, that support, more important than ever.
So Andrew, Luke, given Shelby's comments, Malcolm's comments, thoughts, let's just start. What's your thoughts on that? There's a lot to unpack there.
I think these are very valid questions, anxieties, worries, right? You compound, especially with Shelby, you compound going to college with going to college in a pandemic or potentially not going to college and doing some hybrid or online. These are things that I'm sure Luke and I are hearing every day from incoming families. We still have not made those decisions at Swarthmore, but I know that there are a lot of people, a lot of committees thinking about this. What effects, does this have on returning students and continuing students? I think one theme that I really heard through both of those experiences is building community, right? How do you build community virtually, if that's the case? And I think really finding ways through our faculty and Dean of Students office and student affairs, finding ways for students to continue to build community regardless of what happens in the fall is really important.
Mm-hmm. I would add to that. That's good, Andrew. I think compassion and community are two words that kind of come to the forefront for me. I think Malcolm kind of quoted that lens of compassion, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, especially in light of the circumstances we're all in. But even without that, just that sense of care and compassion for rural students in particular, I think ties back to the community that they oftentimes have been born and raised in, and then that sense of compassion and care that comes out in that. We had a Zoom call, a Zoom meeting with our incoming first-year students last night, and our provost and some other college administrators were on that call, and it was very clear in her remarks that she wanted the first-year students to understand there is a group of folks and a lot of folks that are passionately and compassionately looking toward what the fall looks like, and doing everything they can to make sure that experience can be as good as it can be. And I think everybody is very much like Shelby. Every incoming student wants to be able to plant their feet on the soil of the college that they were admitted to and have ultimately chosen to attend. And hopefully many will be able to do that. But I think we're in this interesting window of colleges between the June 1 and July 1 are going to be making some final concrete decisions, and regardless of what those decisions are, for the support mechanisms of rural students to be prepared to show compassion and support and respond and guide them through that is going to be instrumental, I think, in making sure that they get to that next step of going to college, whether it be online format, in person, or whatever combination their college might choose.
Several of the folks that are on with us today work in college access. So they've worked really hard to get these students enrolled in college, and they're continuing to support them and their families this summer. Thoughts or suggestions about what they could be doing as college access professionals with those students that are waiting to start their freshman year, or even those students that they got into college, like Malcolm a couple years ago, that's wanting to go back? What can they be doing today?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to simply ask, is to engage, right? Engage with their families and better understand their needs. I'm always surprised. I lead a staff now, and we have admission counselors, and we have technical and support staff, and we have administrative staff, and everyone needs very different things. And I constantly have to think, okay, how can I best support whatever function that you're serving in? And I think students are the same. And so for example, not every rural student has the technological support to do online classes. And so what is the college going to do? What are college access professionals able to do given their resources? And so I think it's really thinking through a lot of those pieces and building that network and community, either as a result of this discussion or joining the SIG or whatever it might be, is reach out to folks who are in similar positions to better understand what best practices might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we oftentimes say in our office, the best way to connect to another person is to actually listen and listen to their needs. As Andrew said, listen to what is it they're really looking for, because we all kind of have our own strategies or our own ways to maybe to accomplish something. But if that's not really what the student is needing at that time, the student's not going to be served well. And I think that access to technology is going to continue to be a gap for a lot of rural students, depending on what their fall college plans are, but even looking forward to the recruitment cycle for this upcoming senior class and the sophomores and juniors as well. What access will they be able to have to some of the online tools that colleges are having to leverage to connect the students? And making sure that gap is minimized, if not completely eliminated where possible.
So when we think about, Shelby and Malcolm both have their colleges picked out and they know where they're headed. But what should we be thinking about and being concerned about when we're thinking about the incoming seniors next year, Luke, that you mentioned, but also those students who will be getting ready to, go into their junior year of high school? What should we be concerned about and what should we be doing?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I think is going to really be disrupted is the college visit experience. We're very familiar and used to college access groups bringing groups to campus to tour, or obviously the individual family coming to campus. I think that's going to look very, very different, and every college is going to handle that differently. I was on a call last week with all the independent colleges in Kentucky, and everybody was talking about their visit program, and everybody's doing it differently. And so you've got those that have virtual tools, but those that don't. And I think the access to campus to see it firsthand is probably going to be one of the most noticeable gaps in the recruitment process this fall. That the more that we can be thinking now to develop things, to create things so that they have the access that they can, if they can't plant their feet on campus, but even if they can, what they're going to be able to see and get into is going to be very reduced. I think there's a lot of folks that think, being able to show a residence hall in person is going to be more difficult this fall if you're allowed to have students on campus in terms of your current enrollment. And so that we know is a key thing that students want to see. So how do colleges adapt and provide, access pictures and other ways to see those key components to a college experience, even if they can't physically be there?
And Andrew, the SIG has looked into that. Can you talk to us about a few things that colleges are doing that are members of the SIG and how the SIG is helping to do that college visit piece?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really trying to leverage the network and take bite-sized information and disperse it. So one thing that the SIG is doing is we call it college spotlights, and we enable our college members to do 15-minute recorded presentations. And at this point, I think we have 19 done, and we have 75 interested colleges, and we publish those every week. So it goes onto a YouTube playlist. Counselors can watch them. We require colleges to talk about how they're going to support rural students through the admissions process and on campus. We force them to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We force them, these are things that we all should be talking about, of course, but the SIG is pushing the button a little bit more to ensure that that folks are talking about that. So as opposed to going onto Swarthmore's website, watching me for an hour in a recorded session, you might not need an hour at Swarthmore. You might need just 10 or 15 minutes. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do. And we've had thousands of views at this point, which is really exciting because I think counselors are pushing that out to their students and families. I would agree with Luke. I think the campus visit experience is looking really different. We also accept a lot of college access organizations on our campus. And so I was just on in a meeting yesterday figuring out like how do groups like Gear Up or Trio or whatnot still visit us, but virtually. How do we still curate content? How do we still provide them a campus tour with student tour guides? And I think this is, you know, in some ways an opportunity, right? Crisis creates opportunity at times. And so I think some of these things are definitely here to stay. And I think that in some ways it really benefits rural students. Rural students might not be visiting campus to the extent that more suburban and urban peers are, but we have to think that, we have to remember that virtual is not sort of one size fits all. We have to meet students where they are if they're not able to access broadband internet. And what we know is that rural students and families and counselors are not able to access broadband internet to the same extent as their urban peers, and specifically rural communities of color, right? It's really important for us to recognize those things. And so we have to be innovative. One thing that we did for our admitted students was we offered to provide our panels, our info sessions, our videos via either WhatsApp if you have a data plan and you're or Wi-Fi at the McDonald's and you're able to access that, great. And you can upload those videos in sort of bite sizes to WhatsApp, or sending out USB drives if you have a personal computer at home. We can put that in the mail and you can access that same type of information. So it's really just thinking outside of the box. It's maybe going a couple steps beyond where your planning team would actually go. And then finally, and I'll stop talking, is really for especially rising seniors, is thinking about standardized testing. Colleges need to do more. And this isn't just for rural students, but I think it could be affecting rural students in ways that folks are not imagining. If you are a college and you have not gone test optional, at least in the upcoming year, and you're still requiring standardized testing, not only could it be problematic in the future, we don't know what the fall is going to bring. We don't know if things are going to return to normal. College Board has already announced that they are not doing at-home testing. And so the demand for those tests are really increasing. And so if all of those seats fill up at your rural school and you have to drive 2 hours to the next school, that can really affect rural students' college access plans, right? And so it's just thinking through these policy levers that we as leaders can pull and can really help students through this prospective student and college search process.
Yeah, I think the test score optional piece is something I actually began an email exchange yesterday with some of our college administrators. I mean, Berea College is not test score optional, but based upon the population we serve, and certainly in light of the pandemic, how does that fit into our upcoming recruitment cycle to serve students well? And as Andrew has said, meet them where they are. And I think that does require for some policy tweaks and changes that maybe become permanent, but maybe it is just a one-time thing. But going the extra steps that are necessary. We don't anticipate that our admissions representatives will be able to travel much at all. And if they are, we know they really won't have access to the students as they have had in the past. So we're brainstorming ways to use our admissions reps, admissions counselors to go, how can they do those extra steps to really meet the student, as close as we possibly can, whether it be through USB delivery of information or things through the postal service that we know through maybe a phone call, they can be looking for something, and then there's that relevant information at their fingertips at that point, where that face-to-face interaction is certainly going to be disrupted, whether it's on campus or us going to the school's campus to visit them in their high school. Both of those are going to be disrupted in a way that it's going to force colleges to go the extra step if they truly want to be a service to rural students, because it's going to be easy, so easy. There's already so many other barriers in their way to add that extra step to 2 hours to take the test or go to the McDonald's to watch this virtual tour. Like, how can we put it at their fingertips, literally, in this upcoming cycle, so that they benefit from that college search experience at the deepest level they possibly can.
We've suspended our travel until December 31st. So there will not be a fall travel season for my admission colleagues. And so one thing that we will be announcing with the Rural SIG probably next month is we are going to try to facilitate connections. So essentially what will happen is that high school counselors and advisors at college access organizations will be able to sort of raise their hand and say, we want colleges to meet with our students virtually. And here's how: we're on rep visits, or we have Calendly, or we have Sign Up Genius, or just call me or email me. And we're gonna put that in front of colleges so that they know there are rural communities that want you to engage with them. And I think it, I mean, who knows what's gonna happen, but I think it'll help a bit.
And I've noticed as you all have been talking, folks have been putting resources and links in the chat bar. So please, if you have suggestions of resources, include those, because we'll make sure we share those out with everyone. So I'll put my parent hat on, and I just completed the FAFSA a few weeks ago. But as I was completing the FAFSA, I was thinking about, we're in a place of record unemployment in this nation at this point. And I know from talking with Malcolm and what he's hearing from his fellow Grinnellians is that so many students are worried about whether they can afford to go back to school. So I know this is not as relevant to Berea because of Berea's unique model and that our students do not pay tuition. But Andrew, what are colleges and what should colleges be doing to alleviate that financial worry and to address that financial burden?
Yeah, it's real, and every college is grappling with this. So we've lost a lot of money in our endowment, I will say, and we're looking at budget cuts in terms of operational budgets, and hopefully we haven't made any announcements, and I'm not aware of those conversations, but hopefully it doesn't mean furloughs and it doesn't mean layoffs. But every college is in a really precarious situation. I think if you look at, and there is no model for this, right? Not in recent memory, obviously, but if you look at maybe the 2008 financial crisis, it's probably the closest thing that we can get to. And we are looking at history, right? I wasn't at Swarthmore in 2008, but the one thing that they really tried to save was the financial aid dollars, and to ensure that students are still able to access all of their need-based financial aid, and that they can file an appeal if things have really been dire at home and financial circumstances have really shifted and changed. But I think that every CFO, every financial aid office, every board is looking at that right now. And listening to Shelby, it was so interesting because I remember I wanted to go to college so badly, right? I wanted to leave Wisconsin, go to Arizona, like all of these things that come with going to college. And she was like, please, we just want to be on campus. But there are so many other contributing factors to that type of thing, right? So how do you keep dining halls open? How do you have student support services and auxiliary services and all of these other things and keep the safety and health in mind? And how do you pay for those types of things, right? So I'm not really giving you an answer. I'm really sort of showcasing all of the other questions that really raises. My advice, though, to adults serving students, whether you're a parent or guardian or college access organization, is just be as upfront as possible with that financial aid office, and make sure that they understand your circumstances, because that's the best thing that you can do, as opposed to trying to make it work on your own, because we know that this pandemic has caused record unemployment, and that's affecting a lot of families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add, Dreama, the idea of transparency in financial aid is a difficult one because they're so complex. But the more that families can proactively share with the financial aid administrators and others at their respective schools their current situation and how their ultimate desire to complete that degree is going to be impacted in terms of financial aid, I think meeting them again where they're at in that conversation and understanding the full picture is going to be key. Because I go back to one of Shelby's comments too, where she said, what is the point of me even paying? What is the point of me even going? And if we understand that is always the underlying question, but then you lay a pandemic on that and the challenges of unemployment and everything that comes with the financing of a college education, it's going to be so easy to let that question rule the day, and then they don't pursue ultimately their college choice. So opening up those communication lines and those channels to collect and gather as much as you can to understand the students' financial aid picture and help encourage them to share that with their colleges. Oftentimes, they're embarrassed to share those kinds of details, but it's the transparency is needed in order to really serve them well on the financial aid side.
And Luke, I know with Berea's model, with the students at Berea being low-income students, you all also have significant experience working with families.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things that we've been hearing from the folks in the field is that families are not, they're scared. Families are, the family members, not the young people. What are you all doing to assure families that students, that your best interest is still to go to college?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to those personal conversations. I mean, I can't tell you how many times an admissions counselor, or we're fortunate to have a staff member by title, our family engagement counselor, and she's kind of a shared position between us and financial aid. And so she's constantly on the phone, just kind of helping families and parents in particular understand what the college is going to be doing as that information becomes available. Because again, if we're talking low-income first-generation students, to tell them that this office is going to provide these kind of services, that only scratches the surface. I mean, you've got to really help them understand what's that mean for their student and how that's going to actually play out. Much like Andrew and their institution, we're still in a lot of unknowns in terms of what that really looks like. So we can't go too deep into those conversations. But I kind of pointed back to what our provost, Dr. Leek, said to the students last night. And it was just students on that call, but it was, please understand, we're working diligently to figure this out and to make it be the best that it can possibly be. And if we had our say in this whole process, you would be here and we would make it be as normal as possible. So I think just reassuring them is something that we found ourselves doing. But we constantly are hearing from every week, if not every day, there's that student or parent calling saying, I don't think this is going to happen now because I need to stay and just work for my family or to help contribute to my family's income, or I'm just going to do the community college now and then I'll figure this out once the pandemic passes. Those are constant questions, and we're trying to just reassure them that their acceptance letter to Berea was not about just getting them into the first year, but it was really about their life's future and what a college degree could look like. So if that means for whatever reason you're not ready to come in the fall, let's talk spring deferred. And what's it look like to come a semester later? What's it look like, to make sure that the technology is going to be available? Those with disability and access, services. I mean, that's another very common conversation among if students are being asked to learn online. How are they supported from some of those services? But I think for us, the common theme for us at Berea through all this has been our sense of community and leveraging that to help them understand that we're in this together, we're trying to figure this out together, but we keep the student and their interest as our priority. And when the parents see that, feel that, sense that, it sets them at ease a little bit. But there's still ongoing questions for sure.
Andrew, any thoughts on the family, on how that folks can work with families who have some of this anxiety that might be a little even more heightened than the student anxiety?
Yeah, I get it. I really understand it. And like Luke, we're having a lot of those conversations. We have really beefed up our communication with families this year, more so than any other year. And we've sent messages from the campus directly to our incoming student families, and we've been communicating a lot more. Probably means that's probably why we are getting more questions because we are communicating a lot more. But it's worth it. I know that our financial aid staff and admission staff are both working directly with families. So it's just keeping the lines open. And, like Luke, we are having those same conversations around, maybe this fall isn't the best time for you to come for whatever reason. We're also having those conversations with college access organizations saying, my student is in an unsafe living environment right now. They need to go to college, right? That's really tough when we haven't made those kinds of decisions. We did keep a number of students on our campus, either because there were travel restrictions for international students or because they were homeless or not returning to safe living conditions, and they stayed on our campus, right? And so it's really just taking a very compassionate and empathetic view and set of actions so that you're supporting, whoever the student is and wherever they're coming from.
So as we think about what we can do, I know that the compassion, the caring, the building community with young folks, but anything I haven't asked or any suggestions you want to give to the folks that are supporting these rural students in transitioning to college or returning to college? What's your final recommendations and thoughts?
I mean, I'll dive in first, Andrew. I think for me, it kind of comes back to make sure they understand what it means. Whatever the decision is, whatever the outcome is in terms of what their fall experience can look like, or ultimately what their college search can look like next year, as college access professionals, I think we should be tasked this year more than ever to really help them understand what it means, and that it doesn't mean necessarily a negative pursuit of a college degree. There certainly can be opportunity that comes out of this. It just may be delayed or it may look differently, but I worry a lot about families will make assumptions based upon information that they hear. And we know that's true for first generation low-income students to begin with. But if they're hearing decisions are being made in response to the pandemic that make even less sense, I think it's on us to really make sure they understand what does it truly mean, and make sure that they have those very transparent, clear answers so that they can make an informed decision about what their college plans are for the fall or their college search, if they're at that point too.
One thing I would say is, and especially during this season of graduations, and it just looks very different, obviously, but celebrate their accomplishments. I went to a college signing day for a school, I think in Brooklyn or the Bronx, and I was on Zoom and I was just listening, and it almost brought tears to my eyes. It was really, really remarkable that we're able to celebrate students' accomplishments. And I think, that emotional connection that a college access professional is trying to establish between a student and the college experience, whatever that looks like, is really important. During the last couple of months, I've thought a lot about if this had happened when I was in high school, if this had happened when I was in college, I don't know if I would have delayed college. I'm not sure I would have gone. I'm not confident in that statement. And being a first generation student and, getting my doctorate and being in this profession and seeing just how transformative education can be, it probably would have been helpful for me if I had been in that situation for me to talk to someone like me today. Right? To talk to someone who was in a similar position and really understand kind of the gravity of what college is. And I just can't understate it enough. So that's one sort of piece of advice or an action item, I think, for adults. A second one for adults is to do the heavy lift. And what I mean by that is, it's our responsibility, I think, in a lot of ways, to get in front of admission officers, right? So if you're a college access organization and your students are like, I don't know how to figure this whole searching for college thing out, I hope that you would be in touch with me. You would be in touch with Luke. You'd be in touch with admission officers and say, my students deserve to be in front of you and we need your information. So whether it's signing up for a Zoom or a phone call or whatever it might be, access professionals, counselors, you have a lot of power. You have a lot of import in this process. And so be in touch with us. And then finally, I would say, if you haven't joined the SIG, it's a incredible network of professionals. We do these kinds of discussions as well. We gathered folks around how are you responding in your school communities to COVID-19 and what are some strategies there. We do some learning labs where you can learn about particular topics. One popular one we just did was on building school profiles. So how can a rural school or a rural CBO build a school profile or a CBO profile for admission officers and advocate in really interesting ways? And we're going to do one on teacher letters of recommendation. So it's just a wealth of resources and some place where you can go. And if you are sort of on your own and you're the only person in your school, the only person in your community, it's some place you can go for a lot of support.
Those are great suggestions. And I think, as somebody who does this work, I think the key thing we've learned from this is that relationships that you form between young people are critical. Mm-hmm. And we've had difficulty, as we switch to virtual, how do we stay engaged with students, especially students who may not have the technology at home, the rural students, or may not have the support. And what we found is that in the places where we had that advocate in the school who knew the student, they usually knew the student's best friend or the student's auntie or that kind of thing, and then using those relationships to engage students and differentiating. In a way, this is a lot harder for us because we have to work individually with every student. We've actually got some students we have to mail things to regularly, and then they send them back, and then we're doing stuff by mail. And I know, Luke, you mentioned that, we're going back to mailing out information. So it is really relationships and differentiating. And Andrew, I appreciate what you said is, sort of almost going to bat for them, being there and stepping up for them and demanding that they have the services that they need. I do think too that when we're preparing students, this year's, the next year's seniors in high school, we're going to see rigor has been impacted, significantly. But these students still deserve those opportunities to go to those schools, right? So how do we also get admissions folks to think differently about rigor? Yeah. So thank you both for joining us. It's been a great conversation. We will capture any of the comments in the chat. We'll get answers. We'll also take the SIG information and all the resources and post those and distribute those out. I do want to say, and I know Andrew and Luke and I chatted about this a bit, when we planned today in this discussion, it was really around COVID-19. But the last 2 weeks, this world has shifted, and we're starting as a community to think more about race, equity, justice, and that's deeply impacting our young people. I'm so proud of young people. I think they're leading this charge and they're stepping up. But I also anticipate that this will impact where students want to go to school, what they're thinking about college. And so we're planning a future discussion on that. But Luke or Andrew, is there anything that your colleges are doing with your current students to reach out and to make sure that they're okay during and as they're thinking about race and equity?
Yeah, we definitely are. We're closer in the admissions office to our students, our interns, our tour guides who we're still employing this summer, and we're trying to give them space. We delayed our tours from starting this week because we heard from them and they need a bit more time, and that's okay. And we told them, if you are the type of student who, it's better for you to be busy, we can give you busy work. That's not a problem. But if you need to decompress and recharge and get away from work, that's okay too. And you'll still get paid, and don't worry about this, right? There are bigger fish to fry and bigger concerns than college admissions or what I do every day. And so it's really reaching out and making sure not only are our students okay, are our staff okay, our colleagues okay, really making that recognition and putting in action items. And you might be doing things every single day, and that's great. And this might be the first time that you're really grappling with this as a leader. And it's really important to stop and do something about it, right? And move forward and support people the best way that you know how.
Yeah, just to comment briefly from Berea's standpoint, I think we're fortunate with the college's work program that all of our students that were currently enrolled have had some form of a labor supervisor that oftentimes becomes a more closer direct contact for them than even a faculty member. And so I've heard numerous examples where those labor supervisors over the last couple of weeks have been kind of checking in on their students and just making sure that they're okay. Obviously where we're located, just 2 hours from Louisville, and some of the things that have been happening there, it's really, really close to home. And I'm even reminded of an incoming student, and we're fortunate to have somebody who works very closely in the Louisville area. But she literally lives about a block and a half from where that incident happened with that gentleman there as part of the protest. So I think, having that conversation with her and our staff member reaching out to her made all the difference in the world. And in that moment, it was really about just listening to her and what she was grappling with and what her experience has been over the last couple of weeks, and not feeling like you had to have the answers or even a response to what she was sharing. And I think that approach has been true, whether it's our admissions staff reaching out to incoming students or currently enrolled students hearing from labor supervisors or others. It does come back, Dream, as you mentioned, to come back to that relationship that's been formed, that it's a very personal kind of interaction. We can kind of have some of those conversations and the dialogue can continue and move forward. But I think it's something that I agree, it's going to impact, I think, recruitment for colleges in this upcoming cycle. And then you throw a presidential election in that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of things this fall that are going to impact students' psychological and emotional well-being moving towards their next phase of life. And I think as college access professionals, we've got to be prepared to listen and support them in tangible ways, but then also just in that emotional support as well.
We also reached out, Dreama, just one quick thing. We reached out to our staff and you know, we said, hey, how is this going for you? How's COVID-19? How's working from home? But like, how can we better support you? And the feedback that we got, we try to do everything. I push my team really hard, and I know that. And so I need to step back a little bit. But one thing, it was just, we don't have time to sort of process. And so we have a retreat on Thursday morning, and I talked with my boss, and I said, I'd like to give everyone Thursday afternoon to do anti-racist work, to do protesting, to watch a documentary, to read, to do whatever you think is right in this moment for yourself. And he's like, absolutely. So that's, I mean, that's one small little thing. If you're a leader listening to this and you have that ability, I think it goes a long way with your staff and your faculty or whoever is working with you. And I think just really important to recharge as much as you can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like I said, I think that we're definitely going to dig deeper into that. I appreciate that. And I think it's important to mention it because I do think as college access professionals, as college professionals, we have to realize that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Yeah. So thank you all. Our next, Sam, I think Sam can put up the date of our next session, and we are going to be sending out the dates for the rest of this year so folks can get them on their calendar. So our next session will be July 8th, and our focus of that conversation will be how do we support secondary students, K through 12, that are returning to college in the fall. Bob Balfons, he's with the Everyone Graduates Center there at Johns Hopkins, is really going to talk about social emotional learning, early warning systems, and what we can do to support students that are returning. So thank you all for joining us. If you have any additional final thoughts, comments, or resources that you want to share, include them there in the chat box. And we'll be seeing you all next month and getting this information out in about 2 weeks. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.